The cold November wind cut through Danny's worn-out jacket like it wasn't even there. He pulled the thin fabric tighter around himself and kept walking. The streetlights in this part of town had been broken for months, maybe years. Nobody bothered to fix things here. Danny was 17, but some days he felt about 40. That's what poverty does to you. It ages you faster than time ever could. He lived with his mom in a tiny apartment where the heating barely worked and the neighbors were too loud. But it was home and they made it work. His mom worked at a diner downtown. 2 shifts most days, sometimes 3 if they needed extra help. She'd come home smelling like grease and coffee, her feet swollen and her back aching. Danny tried to help however he could. After school, he'd bag groceries, mow lawns, or help old Mr. Peterson fix things around his building. Every dollar counted. That evening, Danny was heading home later than usual. He'd spent 3 hours helping clean out a basement for $20. His hands were dirty, his muscles sore, but the money was in his pocket. His mom needed it for the electric bill that was due tomorrow. He took his usual route through the alley behind the old factory. It wasn't the safest path, but it cut 15 minutes off his walk. Time was money, and Danny couldn't afford to waste either. The alley was dark and smelled like garbage, but he'd walked it 100 times before. About halfway through, Danny heard something. At first, he thought it was a cat. The sound was small and weak, barely audible over the wind. He almost kept walking, almost, but something made him stop. There it was again, a soft cry, but not quite like any cat he'd ever heard. His heart started beating faster. Something felt wrong. Danny pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The battery was at 15%, but he needed to see what was making that noise. He walked toward the sound, his shoes crunching on broken glass and gravel. The crying was coming from behind a large dumpster that smelled absolutely terrible. Danny held his breath and looked around the corner. What he saw made his blood run cold. There was a cardboard box, the kind that copy paper comes in. Inside that box, wrapped in what looked like an old towel, was a baby. A real, actual baby, barely moving, making weak little cries that broke Danny's heart into a million pieces. For a moment, he just stood there, frozen. His brain couldn't process what his eyes were seeing. Who leaves a baby behind a dumpster? What kind of person does that? The question swirled in his head, but there was no time for answers. The baby's lips looked blue. Even in the dim light from his phone, Danny could see that something was very wrong. The infant wasn't crying hard anymore, just making small, weak sounds. That scared him even more than if she'd been screaming. Danny's hands were shaking as he bent down. He'd never held a baby before. He had no younger siblings, no little cousins. He didn't know the first thing about infants. But he knew this baby was dying. He carefully picked up the small bundle. The baby felt so light, too light, like she weighed nothing at all. She was cold, way too cold. Danny could feel it through the thin towel she was wrapped in. Without thinking, Danny ripped off his jacket. The cold air hit him immediately, but he didn't care. He wrapped the jacket around the baby, holding her close to his chest, trying to share whatever body heat he had. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst. The baby made a small sound against his chest. She was still alive. Barely, but still alive. Danny started running. He ran faster than he'd ever run in his life. His lungs burned. His legs felt like they might give out, but he kept going. The nearest fire station was 6 blocks away. 6 blocks that felt like 6 miles. His phone bounced in his pocket. The baby was pressed against his chest, wrapped in his jacket. Danny whispered to her as he ran, though he didn't even know what he was saying. Hold on, please hold on." Cars passed him on the street. People walked by. Nobody stopped to ask why a teenage boy was running through the streets holding a bundle to his chest. That's how it was in this neighborhood. People minded their own business. Danny's lungs were on fire by the time he saw the fire station. The bright lights looked like heaven. He burst through the door, gasping for air, his legs shaking from exhaustion. "Help," he managed to shout. "Please." "There's a baby." 3 firefighters jumped up immediately. One of them, a woman with kind eyes, rushed over and took the bundle from Danny's arms. Her face went pale when she saw what was inside. "Call 911, she shouted to her colleagues. "We need an ambulance now." Everything happened so fast after that. Danny felt like he was watching a movie. The firefighters unwrapped the baby carefully, checking her breathing and heart rate. Someone threw a blanket around Danny's shoulders. He was shivering but hadn't even noticed. The ambulance arrived within minutes, sirens blaring. Paramedics rushed in with equipment Danny had only seen on TV. They worked on the baby right there, their faces serious and focused. One of the paramedics, a young guy with red hair, looked at Danny. "You found her?" Danny nodded, unable to speak. "Where?" "Behind a dumpster. In the alley near 5th Street. The paramedic's jaw tightened. "How long ago?" "Maybe 10 minutes. "I don't know. I ran as fast as I could." The paramedic put a hand on Danny's shoulder. "You did good, kid. Real good." They loaded the baby into the ambulance. She was so small on that big stretcher, surrounded by all that medical equipment. Danny watched them drive away, the red lights flashing against the dark sky. Then came the police. 2 officers showed up and started asking questions. Where exactly did he find the baby? What time was it? Did he see anyone else around? Danny answered everything as best as he could, but his mind was somewhere else. He kept seeing that tiny face, those blue lips, that weak little cry. One of the officers, an older man with gray hair, closed his notebook. "You did the right thing, son. Not everyone would have stopped. Not everyone would have cared, but how could he not care? That was a baby, a human being. Someone's child, even if that someone had left her to die." The fire chief drove Danny home. His mom was just getting back from work when they pulled up. Her face went white when she saw the fire truck. "Danny? What happened? Are you okay?" Danny told her everything. His mom cried and held him tight, not caring that he was dirty and sweaty. "My brave boy," she whispered. "My brave, brave boy." That night, Danny couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, seeing that cardboard box every time he closed his eyes. The firefighters had told him something before he left. If he'd found that baby even an hour later, she probably wouldn't have made it. 1 hour, 60 minutes. The difference between life and death. Danny thought about all the times he'd taken that shortcut through the alley. Hundreds of times. What if he'd chosen a different route tonight? What if he'd ignored that sound? What if he'd walked past assuming it was just a cat? He pulled his blanket tighter and stared at the dark ceiling. Somewhere in a hospital, that baby was fighting for her life. He didn't even know if she'd make it through the night. But at least she had a chance. Because of him, she had a chance. The next morning, Danny's mom made him breakfast before work. She looked tired, but she smiled at him in a way she hadn't in a long time. "I'm proud of you, baby," she said softly. "So proud." Danny nodded, pushing eggs around his plate. He felt strange. Not quite sad, not quite happy. Just different. Like something inside him had shifted. He had no idea that this was just the beginning. That the choice he made in that dark alley would change his life in ways he couldn't imagine. That saving one life would somehow end up saving his own. All he knew right then was that somewhere, a baby he'd never met was alive because he'd decided to stop and listen. And somehow that had to mean something. Danny couldn't focus at school the next day. His teachers were talking, but their words just floated past him. All he could think about was that baby. Was she okay? Had she survived the night? Nobody had called to tell him anything. During lunch, his friend Tyler noticed something was off. "Dude, you good? You look like you've seen a ghost." Danny hadn't told anyone yet. The whole thing felt too big, too heavy to put into words. But Tyler kept asking, so Danny finally told him the story. Tyler's eyes went wide. "No way. You actually found a baby? Like a real baby?" "Yeah," Danny said quietly. "A real baby." Word spread through the school like wildfire. By the end of the day, everyone knew. Some kids looked at him like he was a hero. Others just stared. Danny hated the attention. He wasn't trying to be special. He just did what anyone should have done. After school, Danny couldn't help himself. He had to know if the baby was okay. He took the bus to City General Hospital and asked at the front desk. The woman there looked at him suspiciously at first. "I'm the one who found her," Danny explained. "I just want to know if she's all right." The woman's expression softened. "Hold on, sweetie." She made a phone call, spoke quietly, then hung up. "Someone will be down to talk to you." 10 minutes later, a woman in her 40s came down to the lobby. She wore a badge that said she was a social worker. Her name was Mrs. Rivera. "You must be Danny," she said with a warm smile. "I've heard a lot about you." "Is she okay?" Danny asked immediately. "The baby. Did she make it?" Mrs. Rivera nodded. "She's stable." It was close, very close. "But she's going to be fine, thanks to you. The doctor said if you'd found her even an hour later." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Danny felt his legs go weak with relief. He sat down hard on one of the plastic chairs in the lobby. Mrs. Rivera sat next to him. "We're calling her Hope right now until we figure out her real name. Do you want to see her?" Danny nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The nursery was on the 4th floor. Through a large window, Danny could see several bassinets. Mrs. Rivera pointed to one in the corner. "That's her. The baby was so small. She had tubes and wires attached to her, but her color looked better. She was sleeping, her tiny chest rising and falling. Something in Danny's heart cracked open. "Can I visit her again?" he asked. Mrs. Rivera smiled. "I think she'd like that." Over the next week, Danny visited Hope every day after school. He'd press his hand against the glass and just watch her. Sometimes she'd be sleeping. Sometimes she'd be awake, her dark eyes looking around at nothing in particular. The nurses started to recognize him, greeting him by name. One nurse, an older woman named Betty, pulled him aside one day. "You're good for her, you know. Babies can feel when someone cares, even when they're this small." Meanwhile, the police were still investigating. They'd found the spot where Danny had discovered Hope, but there were no cameras in that alley. No witnesses. No clues about who the mother might be. It was like the baby had appeared out of nowhere. Then everything changed. Danny's principal, Mr. Harrison, called him into his office one morning. Danny's stomach dropped. Being called to the principal's office was never good news, but when he walked in, Mr. Harrison was smiling. There was someone else there, too. A woman with a camera and a man with a notebook. "Danny, this is Rachel Torres from Channel 7 News. They'd like to do a story about what you did." Danny's mouth went dry. "A story on TV?" Rachel smiled kindly. "If you're comfortable with it. What you did was remarkable. People need to hear about it, and honestly, maybe it'll help us find out who Hope's mother is." Danny wanted to say no. He hated attention. But if it could help find answers about Hope, maybe it was worth it. The interview happened after school. They came to Danny's apartment, which made him nervous. Their place was small and old. The couch had a stain on it. The walls needed paint, but his mom had cleaned everything that morning, and she'd put fresh flowers on the kitchen table, even though Danny knew they couldn't really afford flowers. Rachel asked him questions while the camera rolled. How did he find Hope? What went through his mind? What made him stop? Danny answered honestly. "I heard her crying. I couldn't just walk away. Nobody should be able to walk away from something like that." They also interviewed his mom, who got teary-eyed talking about her son. "I raised him to be kind," she said, "to help people when he can, but I never imagined he'd save a life." The segment aired 2 days later. Danny's mom recorded it on her phone since they didn't have cable. It was strange seeing himself on TV, hearing his own voice played back. The story was only 4 minutes long, but it showed their apartment, showed Danny talking about Hope, and ended with him saying he hoped someone would love her the way every baby deserved. Danny thought that would be the end of it. One local news story, and then life would go back to normal. He was so wrong. The next morning, his mom's phone started ringing before dawn. Friends, neighbors, people from church, everyone had seen the story. At school, kids he'd never spoken to came up to congratulate him. Teachers stopped him in the hallway to shake his hand, but the real shock came that afternoon. Mr. Harrison called him to the office again. This time there was a man in an expensive suit sitting there. He stood up when Danny entered and offered his hand. "Danny, I'm Robert Torres. I own Torres Construction. I saw your story on the news." Danny shook his hand, confused about why a businessman wanted to talk to him. Mr. Torres smiled. "I grew up not far from where you live. My family had nothing. I know what it's like to struggle, and I know what it's like to do the right thing even when it's hard." He paused. "I'd like to offer you a job." Danny blinked. "A job? Part-time after school? $20 an hour. You'd be helping in my office, doing filing, data entry, things like that. Hours would be flexible so you can keep your grades up. $20 an hour." Danny made $7.50 at the grocery store. His mind raced, calculating. That was more than double. That would change everything. "Why me?" Danny asked quietly. Mr. Torres sat back down. "Because you remind me of who I used to be. And because I believe in investing in good people." "What do you say?" Danny nodded, unable to speak. His eyes were burning with tears he refused to let fall. That evening, Danny went to visit Hope at the hospital. He had so much to tell her, even though she couldn't understand. He pressed his hand to the glass of the nursery window. "Things are changing," he whispered. "I don't know how or why, but they are. Mrs. Rivera found him there. "She's doing really well," she said. "She'll be ready to leave the hospital soon." "Where will she go?" Danny asked. "Foster care, most likely. We still haven't found her mother. Hope will need a temporary home until we can arrange something permanent." Danny's heart sank. Foster care. He'd heard stories about foster care. Some were good, sure, but some weren't. The thought of Hope going to just anywhere bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Over the weekend, the news story went viral. Someone had posted it on social media, and suddenly people all over the country were sharing it. Danny's mom showed him the numbers on her phone. Hundreds of thousands of views. Thousands of comments. Messages started pouring in. People wanted to donate to help Danny's family. Someone set up a fund without even asking them. By Monday morning, there was over $5,000 in it. By Tuesday, it had doubled. Danny was overwhelmed. His mom cried every time she looked at the total. They'd never had money like this. They could pay rent for months. They could buy groceries without counting every penny. They could breathe, but with the attention came pressure. News crews wanted follow-up stories. People recognized Danny on the street. His phone, which barely rang before, now buzzed constantly with messages from numbers he didn't recognize. One evening, sitting in their small living room, Danny's mom turned to him. "How are you handling all this, baby?" Danny shrugged. "It's weird. I just did what felt right. I don't understand why everyone's making such a big deal." His mom took his hand. "Because good news is rare, Danny. Because people need to see that kindness still exists. You gave them that." Mr. Torres called that week with more news. "I talked to your landlord," he said. "I'm going to cover your rent for the next 6 months. Your mom shouldn't have to work herself to death." Danny's mom nearly collapsed when he told her. 6 months of rent. That was 6 months where she wouldn't have to work double shifts. 6 months where she could actually rest. But even with all these good things happening, Danny's mind kept returning to Hope. He visited her every day, watching her grow stronger. She'd gained weight. Her color was healthy now. She was starting to really look around, to respond to sounds and voices. Betty the nurse pulled him aside one afternoon. "You know," she said carefully, "I've been doing this job for 30 years. I've never seen a teenager as devoted to a baby he's not related to. You've got a special heart, Danny." Danny didn't feel special. He just felt connected to this little girl who'd come into his life in the most unexpected way. He'd saved her life, sure, but somehow it felt like she was saving his too. The story wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. But as Danny stood at that nursery window watching Hope sleep peacefully, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt hope, real hope, that maybe, just maybe, life could get better. That one moment of compassion could ripple outward in ways he never imagined. He had no idea how much bigger those ripples were about to get. 3 weeks after finding Hope, Danny's life looked completely different. He'd started working at Mr. Torres's office, and the money was more than he'd ever imagined having. His first paycheck made him stare at the numbers for 5 minutes straight. After taxes, it was still more than he used to make in a month. His mom had cut down to 1 shift at the diner. For the first time in years, she was home when Danny got back from school. She smiled more. She didn't wince when she walked. The constant worry lines on her face had started to fade, but the biggest change was the attention. The local news story had exploded beyond anything they could have predicted. National news picked it up. Morning shows wanted interviews. Danny's phone rang constantly with reporters, producers, and people wanting to share his story. His mom helped him filter through it all. They agreed to one more interview, this time with a major network. The crew came to their apartment again, but this time they also went to the hospital to film Danny visiting Hope. The segment aired on a Thursday evening. Danny and his mom watched it on Mr. Torres's TV since he'd invited them over. Seeing himself on national television felt surreal. They'd edited it well, showing the contrast between Danny's humble circumstances and his extraordinary act of kindness. The ending hit different this time. They showed footage of Hope in the nursery, healthy and alert, while Danny's voice played over it. "Every kid deserves someone who'll fight for them. Every single one." Mr. Torres wiped his eyes. His wife put her hand over her heart. "That boy," Mrs. Torres whispered to Danny's mom, "is something special." By Friday morning, everything exploded. The donations to the fund that someone had started for Danny's family went from $15,000 to over $100,000. Danny's mom actually fainted when she saw the number. Danny had to help her to the couch, his own hands shaking. "This can't be real," she kept saying. This can't be real, but it was real. Messages flooded in from all over the country, all over the world. People in other countries had seen the story. Some sent money. Some sent gifts. Some just sent messages of support. A woman in California sent a check for $5,000 with a note. "My son was abandoned as a baby. Someone saved him like you saved Hope. This is my way of saying thank you." A family in Texas sent toys and clothes for Hope. A church in Georgia sent $1,000. An elderly man in Maine sent $50 with a shaky handwritten note. "It's all I can spare, but I wanted to help." Danny read every message. Each one made his throat tight. Mr. Torres called a meeting at his office. He sat Danny and his mom down in his conference room. "I've been thinking," he said. "This money that people have sent, it's life-changing. But it could disappear quickly if you're not careful. I'd like to help you manage it properly." He'd brought in a financial advisor. Together, they helped Danny's mom set up accounts. Some for immediate needs, some for Danny's college, some for long-term savings. They made sure everything was protected and organized. "You're not just helping us with money," Danny's mom told Mr. Torres, tears in her eyes. "You're teaching us how to build a real future." Mr. Torres smiled. "I told you, I know what it's like. Someone helped me once when I had nothing. This is me passing it forward." School became different too. Danny's teachers treated him with new respect. The principal asked him to speak at an assembly about compassion and community. Some kids were genuinely happy for him. Others were jealous, whispering that he was just lucky, that anyone would have done the same thing. But Tyler, his best friend, kept him grounded. "Don't let it go to your head," Tyler joked. "You're still the same dude who can't make a free throw to save your life." Danny laughed. He needed that. He needed someone to treat him normally. His daily visits to Hope continued. The nurses knew him so well now that they'd wave him straight through. Hope had grown noticeably. She was alert, her eyes tracking movement. When Danny talked to her through the glass, he swore she recognized his voice. Mrs. Rivera, the social worker, met with him one afternoon outside the nursery. "We need to talk about Hope's future," she said gently. Danny's stomach dropped. "What about it?" "She's healthy enough to leave the hospital now. We've been trying to find her birth mother, but we've had no luck. The police investigation has gone cold. We need to place her in foster care." "When?" Danny asked. "Next week, probably. We have a family lined up. They're good people, experienced with infants." Danny nodded, but something inside him felt wrong. The thought of Hope going to strangers bothered him in a way he couldn't explain. He'd saved her life. He'd visited her every single day. He'd watched her get stronger. And now she'd just go to someone else's home? That evening, he talked to his mom about it. They were in their living room, which felt bigger now that they could afford to replace some furniture. The TV Mr. Torres had given them sat in the corner. "I don't want her to go to strangers," Danny admitted quietly. His mom looked at him carefully. "Danny, what are you saying?" "I don't know. I just feel like we should do something. Like we're connected to her somehow." His mom was quiet for a long time. "Baby, I know you care about her. But raising a child is expensive, it's time-consuming, We have money now," Danny interrupted. "Not a lot, but more than we've ever had. And Mr. Torres said you could work at his office too, with better pay and benefits. And I'd help. I'd do everything I could. Danny, I'm 42 years old. Starting over with a baby?" She trailed off, shaking her head. But Danny could see she was thinking about it, really thinking about it. The weekend brought more surprises. A local furniture store saw the story and donated a bedroom set for Danny. A grocery store started a program to provide them with free food for 6 months. A dentist offered free dental care for the family. The community had rallied around them in a way that felt almost overwhelming. Everywhere Danny went, people recognized him. They'd stop him to shake his hand, to say they were proud of him, to tell him their own stories about hard times and helping others. One woman stopped him outside the library. She was elderly, leaning on a cane. "Young man," she said, 40 years ago someone helped me when I had nothing. I've never forgotten it. What you did reminded me that goodness still exists. Thank you." These moments made Danny emotional in ways he didn't expect. He wasn't used to people caring. He wasn't used to mattering. Mr. Torres had another proposition. "I've been thinking about starting a foundation," he said during one of their weekly meetings. Something to help kids in situations like yours. Kids who need a boost. Would you be interested in being involved? Not now, obviously. You're still in school. But maybe in the future? Danny felt overwhelmed. A foundation, him? He was just a kid from a poor neighborhood who'd done the right thing. But Mr. Torres was serious. I've got the business experience. You've got the heart and the story. Together we could help a lot of people. The idea planted itself in Danny's mind and wouldn't leave. Meanwhile, the clock was ticking on Hope's placement. Mrs. Rivera called with updates. The foster family was ready. They'd be taking Hope next Thursday. Danny visited Hope every day that week. He talked to her more even though he knew she couldn't understand. He told her about his day, about school, about the crazy things happening in his life. You started all this, you know, he whispered one evening. Everything good that's happening, it's because I found you. Betty, the nurse, overheard him. She came over with a soft smile. You know, in all my years, I've never seen a bond like this. You really love her, don't you? Danny nodded. Is that weird? I barely know her. Love isn't always about time, Betty said. Sometimes it's just about connection. On Tuesday evening, Danny's mom sat him down. She looked serious, almost nervous. I've been thinking about what you said. About Hope. Danny's heart started racing. I talked to Mrs. Rivera. I asked her what it would take for us to become foster parents, maybe even adopt her eventually. Danny couldn't breathe. What did she say? She said it's possible. There's paperwork, home studies, background checks. It would take time, but it's possible. His mom's eyes filled with tears. I never thought I'd raise another baby. But every time I see her, every time I hear you talk about her, I think maybe this is meant to be. Danny hugged his mom tighter than he ever had. Are you sure? No, she laughed through her tears. I'm terrified, but sometimes the best things in life are terrifying. The next day they met with Mrs. Rivera officially. She explained the process. It would take at least a month, maybe longer. Background checks, home visits, training classes. They'd need to prove they could provide a safe, stable home. The good news, Mrs. Rivera said, is that you clearly have community support. You have stable income now. Your home is suitable, and most importantly, you genuinely care about this child. That matters more than anything. She paused, looking at them both. I have to ask, though, why take this on? Danny's mom spoke first. I've spent 17 years raising my son alone. It's been hard. Really hard. But he turned out to be someone who saves lives. Who puts others first? That tells me I did something right. She wiped her eyes. Maybe I'm supposed to do it again. Mrs. Rivera smiled. I'll start the paperwork. The community support grew even stronger when word got out. People who'd been following Danny's story online started a campaign to help them adopt Hope. More donations came in, specifically marked for adoption costs and baby supplies. A local lawyer offered to handle the adoption paperwork for free. A pediatrician volunteered to be Hope's doctor. A daycare center offered a scholarship for when Hope was old enough. Mr. Torres pulled Danny aside at work one Friday. I heard about your mom's decision. About Hope. Danny nodded nervously. He hoped Mr. Torres wouldn't be upset, wouldn't think they were taking on too much. But Mr. Torres smiled. I think it's wonderful, and I want to help. There's an apartment building I own in a better neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, safe area, good schools. I'd like to rent it to your family at the same rate you're paying now. Danny's eyes widened. Mr. Torres, that's too much. You've already done so much. Danny, Mr. Torres said seriously, I told you I know what struggle looks like. Someone gave me a chance once. Let me give you and your family a real chance. A fresh start. That night, Danny stood outside the hospital nursery watching Hope sleep. In a few weeks, if everything went right, she'd come home with them. She'd be his little sister. His phone buzzed. It was Tyler. Dude, you're trending on Twitter again. You're basically famous. Danny smiled but didn't respond. He didn't care about being famous. He cared about the tiny baby sleeping peacefully behind that glass. He'd walked down a dark alley 3 weeks ago and found a dying infant. Now his whole life was different, better, fuller, and it was just beginning. The paperwork was more complicated than Danny or his mom had expected. Page after page of forms, questions about their finances, their history, their home. Every detail of their lives had to be documented and verified. Mrs. Rivera guided them through it all with patience. I know it feels invasive, she said during one of their meetings. But we have to make sure every child goes to a safe home. It's for Hope's protection. Danny understood, but it still felt overwhelming. Background checks took weeks. They had to get letters of recommendation from employers, teachers, neighbors. A social worker came to inspect their apartment, making notes about the smoke detector, the outlets, the space. Danny cleaned like he'd never cleaned before. His mom scrubbed everything until their old apartment practically sparkled. They passed the inspection, but the social worker made it clear they'd need more space if they wanted to adopt. That's when Mr. Torres's offer of the new apartment became crucial. They visited it on a Saturday morning, and Danny's mom actually cried when she saw it. 3 bedrooms, a real kitchen, windows that let in actual sunlight. The neighborhood had trees. Kids played outside safely. "We can't afford this," she whispered to Danny, but Mr. Torres overheard. "Yes, you can. Same rent as before. Consider the difference, my investment in your family." They moved in 2 weeks later. The community helped. People from their church showed up with trucks. Mr. Torres sent some of his construction crew. Tyler and some kids from school helped carry boxes. The new apartment felt like a dream. Danny had his own room for the first time in his life. The 3rd bedroom was set up for Hope, with donations that had poured in. A crib, a changing table, clothes, toys. People they'd never met had sent things, but even with all the good news, there was a complication. 4 weeks into the adoption process, Mrs. Rivera called with news. "We found her," she said quietly. "Hope's birth mother." Danny's heart stopped. She's 15 years old. A runaway. She'd been living on the streets when she got pregnant. She hid it from everyone, even the other street kids. She gave birth alone in that alley and panicked. Danny sat down hard. 15, just a kid herself. Younger than him. "What happens now?" he asked. "We're getting her help. She's in a safe place, getting counseling and medical care. But she has rights as Hope's mother. We need to see what she wants." The next few days were agony. Danny couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. He'd gotten so attached to the idea of Hope being his sister. What if her birth mother wanted her back? His mom held him while he cried one night. "Whatever happens, baby, we gave Hope a chance. We cared about her when nobody else did. That matters." The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. Hope's birth mother, whose name was Crystal, wanted to meet Danny and his mom. Mrs. Rivera said it was unusual, but Crystal had insisted. They met in a conference room at Child Services. Crystal looked tiny sitting in the big chair. She had dark circles under her eyes and scars on her arms. She looked scared and heartbroken and way too young to have been through what she'd been through. Danny didn't know what to say. How do you talk to someone who abandoned a baby? How do you not be angry? But Crystal spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to say I'm sorry. To you, to Hope, to everyone. I was scared and I didn't know what to do, and I thought I was doing the right thing." Tears ran down her face. "I thought someone would find her quickly. I thought she'd go to a hospital and get adopted by a nice family. I didn't think—" She covered her face with her hands. "I almost killed her." Danny's mom reached across the table and took Crystal's hand. Danny was surprised by that. His mom had every right to be angry, but instead she was showing compassion. "You were scared," his mom said softly. "You were a child yourself." Crystal looked up at Danny. "They told me you found her. That you saved her life. Thank you. Thank you so much." She was sobbing now. Danny felt his anger melting away. This wasn't some heartless person. This was a broken kid who'd made a terrible mistake. Mrs. Rivera spoke gently. "Crystal, we need to talk about what happens next. You have rights as Hope's mother. You could work toward getting her back eventually if you're willing to put in the work. Get stable, get help." Crystal shook her head. "No, I can't. I'm not ready to be a mom." "I don't know if I ever will be." She looked at Danny and his mom. "But I want to know she's safe, that she's loved." "She will be," Danny's mom promised. "If you let us, we'll love her with everything we have." Crystal nodded. "Mrs. Rivera told me about you. How you've been visiting every day. How you want to adopt her. I want that. I want her to have what I never had. A real family." The meeting lasted 2 hours. Crystal signed papers terminating her parental rights. She held Hope one time, crying the whole time, telling her she was sorry and that she hoped one day Hope would understand. It was the hardest thing Danny had ever watched. Crystal was giving up her baby so that baby could have a better life. That took a different kind of courage. After Crystal left, Mrs. Rivera sat with Danny and his mom. "This changes things. With the birth mother voluntarily terminating her rights and specifically wanting you to adopt Hope, the process will be faster. We still have to complete home studies and training, but it's looking very good. Danny let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The training classes were intense. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening for 4 weeks, Danny and his mom attended sessions about infant care, attachment, trauma, legal responsibilities. Danny learned how to change a diaper, how to prepare formula, how to soothe a crying baby. He was the only teenager in the class. The other prospective parents were mostly couples in their 30s and 40s. Some of them looked at him strangely at first. A 17-year-old learning to care for a baby? But the instructor, a kind woman named Linda, praised him constantly. "You're more prepared than people twice your age," she told him. "You ask good questions. You take this seriously." During this time, Danny still worked for Mr. Torres and kept his grades up. It was exhausting, but he managed. Mr. Torres was understanding about the schedule, letting Danny adjust his hours when needed. Tyler helped him study for tests he missed because of training classes. "You're going to be a big brother," Tyler said one evening while they worked on algebra. That's wild, man, it was wild. Danny was going to be 18 in 3 months. Most kids his age were thinking about prom and graduation in college. He was preparing to help raise a baby. The home visits continued. Social workers came unannounced sometimes, checking to make sure the apartment was still safe and clean. Danny's mom kept everything perfect. She'd learned from her life of struggling that you had to work twice as hard to prove you deserved good things. 6 weeks after they'd started the process, Mrs. Rivera called with the news they'd been waiting for. "The court date is set. 2 weeks from Friday. If everything goes smoothly, you'll be approved as foster parents with intent to adopt." Danny marked the date on his calendar. It felt like the most important day of his life. The local news wanted to do another story. Rachel Torres, the reporter who'd done the first piece, called personally. "I'd love to follow up. Show how far you've all come. Would you be comfortable with that?" Danny asked his mom. They talked about it for a long time. They'd had enough attention in some ways. But this story might help other people. It might encourage more adoptions, more foster parenting. They agreed to one final interview after the court hearing, assuming everything went well. The day before court, Danny visited Hope at the hospital one last time. She was in a regular room now, not the nursery. She'd gained weight and looked healthy. Her eyes were bright and alert. Betty, the nurse, let him hold her. It was the first time. Hope felt so small in his arms, but she was warm and solid and real. She looked up at him with those dark eyes, and something in Danny's chest expanded. "Tomorrow," he whispered to her. "Everything changes. You're coming home." Hope made a small cooing sound. Betty laughed. "I think she approves." That night, Danny couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed in his new room, staring at the ceiling. His life had changed so much in just 2 months. He had a job he liked. His mom was healthier and happier. They had a nice home. And tomorrow they might officially become Hope's family. He thought about that cold November night. About the sound of crying behind a dumpster. About the choice he'd made to stop and look instead of walking past. One choice. One moment. It had changed everything. His mom knocked softly and came in. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. Danny shook his head. She sat on the edge of his bed like she used to when he was little. "Are you scared?" he asked her. Terrified, she admitted, but also excited. Also ready. She took his hand. "You know what I realized? I thought I was done raising kids. I thought my life was just going to be work and bills and getting by. But maybe this is my second chance." "Our second chance? What if we mess up?" Danny asked. "We will mess up," his mom said with a small laugh. "Nobody's perfect, but we'll love her. We'll try our best. That's all any parent can do." The court hearing was at 10 in the morning. Danny wore the one nice shirt Mr. Torres had bought him. His mom wore a dress she'd found at a thrift store. They sat in the waiting room holding hands, both of them shaking. Mrs. Rivera came out. "They're ready for you." The judge was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes. She looked over the paperwork, asked them questions about their home, their finances, their plans. Danny answered honestly, his voice stronger than he felt. The judge looked at him directly. "You're young to be taking on this responsibility. Why do you want to do this?" Danny thought about all the things he could say. About how he'd saved her. about how they'd bonded, about how it felt right, but what came out was simpler. Because she needs us. And because we need her too, the judge smiled. That's the best answer I've heard in a long time. She signed the papers. Congratulations. You're officially foster parents with intent to adopt. Hope will come home with you today. Danny's mom burst into tears. Danny felt like his heart might explode. They were a family. Really, truly a family. They went straight to the hospital. The nurses had prepared everything. Hope was dressed in a little pink outfit someone had donated. Her diaper bag was packed. The discharge papers were ready. Betty hugged them both. Take care of our girl, she said, wiping her eyes. Danny carried Hope to the car in her carrier. She was so light, so fragile. He buckled her in carefully, triple-checking that everything was secure. The drive home felt surreal. His mom drove slowly, carefully. Hope slept the whole way. When they pulled up to their apartment building, their neighbors were waiting outside with balloons and a banner that said, "Welcome home, Hope." People clapped. Some cried. Tyler was there with his mom, grinning. Mr. and Mrs. Torres were there. Even some of Danny's teachers had shown up. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. That night, after everyone had left and Hope was asleep in her crib, Danny stood in her doorway just watching her breathe. His mom came up beside him. "We did it," she whispered. "Yeah," Danny said. "We did." They had no idea what came next. Sleepless nights, probably. Stress and worry and moments of doubt, but also joy and love and the kind of purpose that makes life meaningful. Danny had walked down a dark alley and found a dying baby. Now that baby was home, safe, loved, and part of his family. It was the kind of thing that shouldn't happen. The kind of miracle that seemed impossible. But it had happened, and it was just the beginning. The first night with Hope home was chaos. Danny had thought he was prepared. He'd taken all the classes, read all the pamphlets, watched all the videos. But nothing really prepares you for a real baby in your home at 2 a.m, Hope cried. A lot. Danny's mom handled the feedings, but Danny helped with everything else. Diaper changes, rocking her back to sleep, checking on her every 20 minutes to make sure she was still breathing. By morning, they were both exhausted. But when Hope looked up at them with those dark eyes and made a small cooing sound, it was worth it. School became harder to balance. Danny was running on maybe 4 hours of sleep. His teachers noticed. One of them, Ms. Peterson, pulled him aside after class. "I heard you adopted the baby you found," she said. "That's incredible, Danny, but you can't let your grades slip. You've worked too hard." She was right. Danny was on track to graduate with a good GPA, maybe even get into college. He couldn't lose that now. So he adjusted. He did homework during lunch. He studied during his breaks at work. Tyler helped by sharing notes from classes Danny struggled to stay awake in. "Dude, you look like a zombie," Tyler joked one afternoon. But like a zombie who's doing something really cool. The exhaustion was real, but so was the joy. Every day, Hope did something new. She started smiling more. She'd grip Danny's finger with her tiny hand. She recognized voices now, turning her head when Danny's mom spoke. 3 months after bringing Hope home, the final adoption hearing was scheduled. The foster period had gone smoothly. Social workers had done their check-ins and found everything in order. The apartment was safe. Hope was thriving. Danny's grades had stayed solid. His mom was managing work and childcare with help from a daycare scholarship the community had provided. The adoption hearing was simpler than the first court visit. The same judge looked over the reports and smiled. "Everything looks excellent. This baby is lucky to have you." "We're the lucky ones," Danny's mom said, her voice thick with emotion. The judge signed the final papers. "Congratulations. Hope is officially your daughter." Hope was theirs. Really, truly, legally theirs forever. The celebration that evening was small but perfect. Mr. and Mrs. Torres came over with dinner. Tyler brought a cake his mom had made. Some neighbors stopped by with gifts. It wasn't fancy, but it was filled with love. Danny held Hope while everyone sang Happy Adoption Day. She was 5 months old now. Bigger and healthier than that cold November night in the alley. Sometimes Danny still couldn't believe this was real. But life kept moving forward. Danny turned 18 in March. His mom threw him a small party. Hope was there in her high chair, smashing cake with her hands and giggling. It was the best birthday Danny had ever had. College acceptance letters started arriving. Danny had applied to a few local schools, nothing fancy. He couldn't leave his mom and Hope to go away somewhere. He needed to be here. He got into the community college with a partial scholarship. Mr. Torres offered to cover the rest. "You're going to college, Danny, no arguments. I'll work around your schedule and we'll make it happen." Danny started classes that fall. It was hard juggling everything. He'd go to class in the morning, work in the afternoon, come home to help with Hope in the evening, then study late at night. But he managed, he had to. He'd come too far to quit now. Hope grew fast. By her first birthday, she was walking, babbling, getting into everything. She had Danny's determination and his mom's smile. She loved books, which Danny read to her every night before bed. She loved music, dancing whenever she heard it. The local news did their follow-up story on Hope's first birthday. Rachel Torres came back to interview them one more time. The segment showed their apartment, showed Hope taking her first steps on camera, showed how far they'd all come. A year ago, this baby was left to die in a cold alley. Rachel's voice narrated over footage of Hope laughing. Today, she's a thriving toddler with a family who loves her. And the teenager who saved her life? He's now in college, working part-time and helping raise his little sister. This is what happens when one person chooses compassion over convenience. The story went viral again, but this time Danny barely noticed. He was too busy living his life to pay attention to the internet. Mr. Torres approached him during work one afternoon with a proposal. "Remember when I mentioned starting a foundation? I'm ready to do it. And I want you to be part of it from the beginning." The Torres Foundation for Youth Opportunity launched that winter. Its mission was to help teenagers in difficult circumstances, providing mentorship, job opportunities, and financial support. Danny became the youth ambassador, sharing his story at events and helping identify kids who needed help. It was perfect work for him. He understood struggle, he understood what it meant to need a chance, and now he could help provide those chances to others. One evening, a 15-year-old kid named Kevin came to Danny after an event. "I heard your story," Kevin said quietly, "about finding the baby and everything. I'm in a tough spot right now. My family lost our apartment. I'm sleeping on my friend's couch and trying to stay in school." Danny listened to Kevin's story. It sounded so familiar. It was his story, just with different details. "Can I help you?" Danny asked. That's how Kevin became the foundation's first official mentee. Mr. Torres found him a job. They helped his family get into stable housing. Danny checked in with him weekly, made sure he was doing okay. Seeing Kevin's situation improve felt almost as good as everything that had happened in Danny's own life. This was the ripple effect. His one act of compassion that cold night had led to this, to helping others in the same way he'd been helped. Hope was 2 when Danny graduated from community college. He'd completed his associate degree in business management while working and helping raise his sister. It had taken him 3 years instead of 2, but he'd done it. His graduation was small but meaningful. His mom cried. Hope clapped without understanding why. Mr. Torres shook his hand and told him he was proud. Tyler was there, having just finished his own degree at a different school. "We made it, man," Tyler said. "We actually made it," they had. Against odds that should have crushed them, they'd made it. Danny was 20 when he got promoted to program director at the Torres Foundation. He was young for the position, but Mr. Torres trusted him. "You understand these kids because you were one of them," Mr. Torres said. "That's worth more than any degree." The foundation helped hundreds of young people over the next few years. Some needed job training, some needed housing assistance, some just needed someone to believe in them. Danny provided all of it, remembering how Mr. Torres had believed in him. Hope started preschool. She was smart and kind, always sharing her toys with other kids. Her teachers said she had a big heart. Danny wasn't surprised. She'd been raised by people who'd chosen love over everything else. Sometimes when Danny picked Hope up from school, he'd think about Crystal, the scared 15-year-old who'd made the hardest choice of her life. He wondered where she was, if she was okay, if she ever thought about the baby she'd given up.